On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome, everybody, inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is The Jake Feinberg Show. So happy you could be part of the program today. Save something for the children, so says my guest. Maybe a song for Wounded Knee, or the fundamental respect of basic human rights and the historical significance of the indigenous people. Let the dove fly free, so says my guest, on the wings of a dove which carries the melodic fiddle of Papa John Creach, or riding the tiger with Jimmy Hendrix in a smoky lounge with a Hammond organ swirling the liquid fusion of musical styles that brought my guest and his long-lost bass to the States. He is one of the most unheralded multi-instrumentalists to come out of the melting pot that was San Francisco. Every picture tells a story, and the one painted by my guest is a blanket of Ansley Dunbar fills, blues piano with Steamhammer, original scores for documentaries, and a little late-night Moonalice at the Sail Inn. It reaches beyond the music with my guest, who has made it his mission to fight for human rights causes and remember the leaders who fought for their own people. He shares this attitude with Peter Rowan and Grace Slick, David Nelson, and Babatunde Olatunji. Save the whales, save the streams, save the drinking water for my kids and yours, and do it through music, strong music from John Heisman, John McLaughlin, and Dave Holland. Pete Sears, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Does that bring back some memories, dropping some of those names?
Yeah, that was quite an introduction. Yeah, that was some. It did bring back some memories. Yes, what I have left of them.
Right, it's a little bit foggy. Pete, my first question for you is. Can you talk about the significance of Steve Parrish? And I mean, the only reason I'm even talking to you today is because of him.
Yeah.
This. I was reading all the guys who were part of Moonalice, and Steve comes up there as the originator of the Jerry Garcia band. So talk about how you met Steve and how much he still does for Moonalice as a roadie.
Well, yeah, I've known Steve for many years. Go back. I actually met him through Jerry. The first time I played with Jerry was back in 1970. I was 71. I was still with Stoneground at the time. We would just come back from England after doing an album over there, and which was never released, which it should have been. But anyway, we were staying in Mill Valley and met John Cipollina. John introduced me to Jerry. We went down to KSAN radio, Richard Gossett's show. They were on Sutter Street back in those days, the FM rock radio. And we did a live broadcast with Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir and John Cipollina on the guitar. I played an old upright piano it was all done from the record library with Mario Cipollina on bass, and it was all done from the record library. And Jerry played the pedal steel.
Wow!
And it was all very live. And Steve was there, So that's the first time I met Steve, and it goes back quite a way. There's a bootleg of that flying around somewhere.
I'm looking for that. I got to look for that.
And I think, and Richard had given me a reel-to-reel of that show right afterwards, and lots of dead air time, and it was a really, they ended up doing the KSAN broadcast from the record plant, a more sophisticated thing. But this was a really, thrown together kind of fun thing. You know, you can hear Jerry talking, and it was really a lot of fun. But anyway, I remember I stored that. Went back to England and stored the tape in my dad's closet, you know, while I was off gallivanting around the globe. And I did it I think he ended up throwing it out one day along with his old grunting tape recorder, not realizing it was mine, and that was that. It was pity because it was a really high quality tape. It would have been a nice thing to have put out or something, or done something with. But there is a bootleg. It's not very good quality, but I hear it's around. But anyway, so I met Steve back then, and then over the years, various functions. Often when I'd either go backstage occasionally, and in Jerry's little dressing room, each band member on stage would have they'd have these curtains sectioned off for their dressing room on stage, and so I'd meet him there, and then over the years, just and then a lot of benefit work. I used to help organize the music for benefits for various functions, like made anything from Guatemalan human rights to rainforest stuff, you know, anything like that. Anyway, and Steve would always be with Jerry. Jerry would play those shows, and he had a very kind heart, and he was always very ready to help people. You know, I mean, some people are a little cynical about that. They think people took advantage of Jerry by by getting him to do benefits, but it actually gave him that really happy feeling after a benefit, which because he likes to help people, and so Steve was there and always helping, and we became friends over the years. And then when through the 90s, I was playing with Hot Tuna all through the 90s for 10 years, and I wasn't making the kind of money I was with Starship back in the old days. Jefferson Starship in the 70s, not the horrible 80s, but the that wasn't. I didn't like that period. The early 80s was okay, but the 70s was great for Jefferson Starship, and we had a good time, and that was fun. And but the 90s, I was playing with Hot Tuna, and we were touring a lot, and so there was periods there where we were pretty low on cash, Jeanette and I, and so I couldn't really afford a road case that go around it. So I used to go out to Belmarin, Keys, and Steve and Ramrod would be out there in a little trailer behind the place, and he never had, it's like an old friend, just never hesitated. I'd rumble out there in my old station wagon, and you go out, he'd just find it. They'd go through all these cases looking for a case to fit my amp or my keyboard, and that's what I was playing with them at the time, was keyboards, obviously with Hot Tuna. And then when Jack wasn't there, we were with Jorma Kaukonen and Trio, and I'd play bass on the keyboards, but we used to tour Italy, and we toured a lot. We had really good crowds, and it paid me well. It was good, but anyway, I'll get into all that.
No, I mean, it's just,
it was interesting. But Steve was very kind, so we were really close, and I became close, and he ended up in Moonalice, and he travels with us everywhere on the bus, and he comes on stage before each show and tells a story or talks about something, whatever he feels like talking about, and it's like an introduction before every Moonalice show, and of course we broadcast every show with really high quality cameras and on the internet, and so he's so that's Steve. Yeah, he's just great. It's great to be traveling with him and have it really is. He's a very very cool guy. You know, he's like a walking encyclopedia. He's just unbelievable man.
Well, I mean, I'm coming up to talk to him at the Sail Inn when you guys come in here, because I really would love to interview him. And at first, he didn't know where I was coming from. I mean, he's this young guy, 35 years old, and I'm asking him to talk specifically about his relationship with guys like John Cahn and Jerry Garcia. So he was a little taken aback. But I think the next time we talked, he's like, you really should interview Pete Sears. And I was like, oh, okay. So I started doing research, and the thing, Pete, that is confounding, it's not confounding, it's what happened. But this is such a great opportunity, because I've talked to guys that were part of the wrecking crew in Los Angeles, or just were heavy studio musicians in Southern California. Mm. And I know you did that as well, but I would love you to talk about, you got your start on TV programs in England and did a lot of studio work. Could you talk about the studio scene in London?
Yeah, I started playing around about professionally, 1965. And we recorded. I was in a band called the Sons of Fred. Yes. It was a semi-pro band that went pro, and we had a backer, and we had a record company and a booking agent and everything. We had an old beat up old van that would break down and in the snow, but we'd always make it to the gig, and always used to fight with the promoter to try to get cash, because if you just sent a check back to the agency, we'd probably never see it. And when we needed the money to get to the next gig,
absolutely.
But I remember all kinds of stories of that band. We had a lot of fun, but that was actually a really good, really great place great band to really get going, learn the trade, so to speak. I mean, we played 6 or 7 nights a week. And we just played all over the British Isles, and we did Ready Steady Goes live. It was a TV show, and in fact, one on TV show over there, and Thank Your Lucky Stars, another one, and we actually played live on Ready Steady Go, and Thank Your Lucky Stars. Everybody lip synced, of course, but all the bands did it, and so I'd did that, for a few years, and it surprised me. I thought that band would have just faded into oblivion, and we had some singles up, that got up pretty high in the charts, but not that high, and we recorded like at Abbey Road, it was called EMI Studios back then, on the same equipment as the Beatles. But,
right, that's right.
But we didn't sell anywhere near as many records.
Of course not. But I get what I'm getting at is like there was. I'm not sure when you came to the States, but there was a Motown had moved out from Detroit to Los Angeles, and then there was all the studio work, and it's just so great because I talked to all the cats, and they were fighting like heck just to survive. I'm talking about just jazzers who were playing live, and the problem was that some of the most accomplished studio guys who were getting, they were working in the studios 8 hours a day, and they'd go out at night and play for free. So there was no room, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
so
I was more like a live musician in a band that would play live musician. I mean, I'd play live in bands, and then I would do studio work as well. I wasn't really a studio musician, so to speak. There are guys that's their main gig, right? And then, but I was sort of my main gig was playing in bands, and then. And back in the Sons of Fred days, I wasn't really doing a lot of studio work for other people back then. It was just all the Sons of Fred. It's 1965. I'm pretty young, and anyway, that band. There's like a underground following of that band. I just did an interview for Ugly Things magazine.
Mm-hmm.
A while back on that band, but that was interesting. I really surprised. I was amazed, but
some of the records.
Anyway, then I went to a band called Fleur de Lis, and that's when I met Hendrix. For the first time, he came into Chaz Chandler from the Animals had brought him over from brought him over from the States, and for the first time before the experience, and Eric Burden was. I thought I was staying at Eric Burden's. I was in Eric Burden's kitchen for some reason. I don't quite remember that. Because some of the guys from the band were staying in his house, and Jimmy walked in, and he seemed like a real nice guy. Just he didn't have all his velvet stuff on then. He just jeans, and he did. I guess I'm not sure who he'd been playing with, Little Richard or something, and he came over and anyway, just a real sweet guy, just really unassuming, and we had no idea he was going to be, he was such a great guitar player at the time. We hadn't heard him, and anyway, but I got to know Mitch Mitchell pretty well because we almost formed the band back in '69, right before I first came to the States, but so I went back and forth, and then I started doing some. Oh, then I got into the sort of psychedelic period after Fleur de Lis with Sam Gopal Dream, an Indian tabla player, with Mick Hutchinson on guitar. It was a three-piece instrumental, and the tabla player was a real, he really played tabla.
Well, I don't want to. I want to talk about this specifically. I mean, the story is that Hendrix came to see you guys at the Speakeasy, and the. I'm trying to envision a guitar player like Mitch Hutchinson, and then you're either on bass or Hammond B3, and then Sam is playing tablas.
Yeah,
I'm like, what? Amazing. I mean, can you? That's really was my question. Is that how? I talked to Dave Holland, and he was, the Indian music was all over the place in London and in England,
yeah.
But. I love that kind of. I love that the sort of melting over of ethnic instruments and putting it together in what they would call a psychedelic. Where are the tapes of that stuff? Because to me, the tablas are that infectious polyrhythmic stuff. I just want to see Pete Sears on the B3 with tablas. I don't even know how did.
Well, I played mostly bass with that band, and I played some B3. I used to borrow Graham Bond's B3 and sometimes and. But I was mostly bass, and I was with piano with the Fleur de Lis before that, but bass. And we played the UFO in Tottenham Court Road, just one of the first psychedelic kind of clubs, in London. And then we got into the Middle Electric Garden, which later became the Middle Earth in Covent Garden, and Happening 44, and we played the Alexander Palace. That was like two days of continuous music. We played at 5 a.m. in the morning, and that's
I love it.
But unfortunately, we played the Speakeasy, and that's when Jimmy, the Speakeasy. There were record companies that were interested, like Richard Branson. We were in his office before the very beginning of Virgin, but everybody wanted a vocalist, in those days, and we just did this sort of to us it was, sounds pretentious, but we took it quite seriously. We took the music. We did it. We actually did Mick Mick Hutchinson is a brilliant guitar player and has a sort of an underground following in Europe. He plays ragas, amazing. You can see him on YouTube. And doing things out of his house, and
he plays ragas on the guitar.
But Sam Gopal, but Sam lives in Munich now. But he was, he's trained tabla player from birth. I mean, almost, just one of those situations. To be to know an Indian, really be able to play an Indian instrument, it takes a lifetime. I mean, it's probably, but so it was really weird. It influenced the rock scene in England, and it was up. But before that, we were playing Motown and blues, and I was anyway. And then we got into this, started taking acid, and just really getting
right.
Getting
no, but just put Jake Feinberg right there. I'm just trying to figure out. This is so. Yeah. How
We'd
was
play
it?
And everybody was sit. The audience would be stoned. They'd sit there for hours.
Hours. I mean,
sometimes. In the Middle Earth Club, they just sit there on the floor. Completely out of it, and we'd be up on stage doing it, and we'd play in one key for like 30 minutes, and just, one of the most profound musical experiences of my life, which convinced me of some sort of musical telepathy, which was we always played this one raga, this tune, this thing, and I was interacting on the bass with the tablas, and now I do when I play with jam with Barry Sless in the David Nelson band, and John Molo or Wally Ingram, whoever's with David Nelson, and of course Moonalice, John Molo. Barry and I are in Moonalice when we get with Roger when we get into the jams. I find that I draw on that sometimes. That tabla, just that playing with those rhythms, with the tabla rhythms, can be just became ingrained, and so it was we were playing in this one key, and then suddenly just Mick and I just changed keys instantly together. And went to a different key with no prearranged signals or no signals of any kind, and we all just looked up at each other, and we had tears rolling down our cheeks.
That's beautiful.
It was just unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Moment. And there's no because usually in music you can you can do things like that similar to that, but they're like in a drum and a bass player can do turnarounds because just based on sort of empirical knowledge of having, you kind of know what just from the very instinctively know immediately from hearing the first drum fill, you know where it's going, and you sort of play it together, right? Play the fill together as a bass player. But sometimes this happens with drums, like John and I do. It happens, and it you just sometimes you do a fill and it's completely out of left field, or if you're in the middle of a jam and you do something, and absolutely no way it could have been thought out or arranged or anything, and you just kind of glance at each other and give each other a sort of a knowing look, and wow, that was an amazing moment,
I know.
And that's what,
I know.
Yeah.
I know that.
Am I touching on you're answering your question?
You're doing. No, I mean, it's just such a trip to talk to you because I mean, literally, you're like, I used to say jack of all trades, and then people corrected me and said, no, actually, these guys are masters of all trades. And I'm just trying to say, like, I listened to your bass playing on an album like, Insane Asylum, or even with Starship, and I'm trying to figure out how you found room to play. You weren't playing upright bass with this band. You were playing electric bass,
right? And
I'm trying to figure out where you found the room with the space within the music to do it. I mean, because every time whether it's Zakir Hussain with John Handy or Colin Walcott in Oregon, it doesn't. I mean, there's an upright bass, but I've never heard electric bass with tabla. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I sit up at night and think about. So I mean, tell me.
Well, I learned to. Somehow just developed this way of playing. I play with my sometimes three fingers, two on my right hand, and sometimes I play up and down the neck. Sometimes I play actually on the neck itself with my right hand as well as my left hand. You can, by tapping the strings a certain way, you can. I mean, you're never going to reproduce an upright bass sound, but you can. I do this when I'm playing Peggio or something with David Nelson, or Hallelujah with Roger, or in Moonalice. Just do a sort of I play with my part of my finger, just my first finger, and pluck the string.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of has that. So it's really just a presence, a bass presence, rather than this note, this loud note. You're really just playing this simple line, but with bass, but with the tabla, I'd learned to try to sort of learn his just in the spirit. It's really we all sort of played Indian music in the spirit of Indian music. We listened to Ravi Shankar and Alaraka and Zakir's father, and everything.
Of course,
and
yes.
we just listened to those guys, and they were just everywhere, in our minds. And for this particular band, anyway, we'd be playing these clubs with Fairport Convention and different people like that, and you really had free reign to do anything you wanted, and
did you have a lot of
experiment?
Did you because I mean, obviously there were freaks like myself that were there enjoying it. But were there? I mean, was there Indian people that were showing up and watching this stuff too, or
no?
No,
I don't think so.
Okay,
I mean, not that I know of.
Right.
I don't. Occasionally, I would see somebody, but it's quite possibly. But
No,
but at the same time, having said that, I had some friends that were Indian musicians, and certainly, because I mean, I didn't, never try to claim that I know how to play Indian music. I was, as I say, to learn to play those ragas and those rhythms, and it takes a lifetime, and you study under a master, and you cook for them, and I mean, it's just I mean, but I think they were flat. I think the Indian musicians were flattered or liked it that we well, not us, but they liked it that we were doing what we were doing because they were friends with Sam. They knew Sam, and they liked what we were doing because Mick Hutchison was very, very, very good guitar player. He knew jazz, and he could play those ragas really well. And but they to actually play that, that they knew we weren't trying to say we knew how to play indie music. It was just everywhere, and because people that the Beatles had Sgt. Pepper out, and I'm talking about like 1967.
Absolutely, no, and that's what.
And so, of course, George brought that influence in, and I mean, it was just swirling around the music scene. So the British music scene had the combination of blues, rock, soul, Celtic was a big influence. Was an important influence, in bands like Traffic, and that was an important influence. And sometimes you bring in Indian music and just that feel, that general influence, and that would give the music a certain quality. And that's what that was. I suppose what you'd call the British sound in a way was. There's certainly many different types of British music. Blue, obviously blues, but all those styles that we loved, people we loved to hear when we were just young kids in England, but we were listening to B.B. King and Freddie King and then Stax and Motown and then so we sort of we were doing that kind of music, and then the psychedelic thing came along. That wasn't until then I became a sort of aware of the San Francisco sound, really. And I wasn't really, I didn't really have I didn't have time to really listen thoroughly to anything. At that point, by 1967, I was just roaming around London and all over England, and just kind of playing and Scotland and everything, playing just existing as a young musician. I didn't even have a stereo player at that point. I was just, we were just going from pad to pad and flat to flat, we'd call it, and just hanging around, playing and existing, and I don't know. I wasn't really studying anything. I was just playing. Right, I wasn't studying.
Right,
Kenny
right.
created a sort of a style, but anyways, the bass. I used to I have an old upright bass downstairs, but which the neck's been broken for 30 years, and I haven't fixed it. But one of these days, I will do that. But I'm not a trained upright bass player, but I'm one of those a bass player that picked up the upright bass and started learning how to play it, just what I wanted to play, and so again, I wouldn't call myself an upright bass player, but I love to play the upright bass.
Well, I was going to, I think you said so much great stuff. The British invasion, as we like to call it here in the States, was not just the Beatles. It was it was all these, like you said, it was this what you were hearing, but you really weren't listening a lot. You were actually you were playing, and whether it was a speakeasy or whether it was a rock palace or or in the studio, you didn't have time to listen, and you were just playing, and then maybe you'd hear the stuff back, down the road if the record was ever cut, or something along those lines. But my question is talk about if you brought an upright bass to Moonalice with John on drums, how do you think it would change the sound? I just, what I'm trying to say is it's so set now. You go to shows and it's all good. I mean, but you don't see, like you talked about going to K-San with Garcia. He's on the pedal steel, and the Cipollina brothers were there. And I'm just saying to myself, the more dynamic, the more interest, the more world music instruments that are on the stage. It's just, to me, it just changes the people's eye level. It obviously opens their ears. I just want to see Pete Sears with an upright bass. I mean, how would that change the sound?
If I fix the neck finally, but I think I'm probably so out of practice now that it'd take me a while to get back up to speed. But But as I say, I incorporate that feel into, because one of my favorite bass players of all time was Ray Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying I can play like Ray Brown, but I'm saying that he was one of the but of course at the same time I was listening to Duck Dunn, and Jamie Jameson and those guys, and way back, and so I tried, if the song needs the feel of an upright bass, I've sort of found a way to it's obviously it's electric, but I try to hit strings, play it in such a way that it has that feel of the upright bass. So so we are moving around and playing different things and different styles, and within a jam we go all over the place, from jazz to rock to blues. With Barry Sless, is an amazing player, and John, and of course Molo on drums, and we just move around. That's what I like about playing with Moonalice, and then when I play with Nelson, we just get these jam sections.
Oh, it's
freeform. It's completely freeform.
No, and it's the feel. It's feel, and
you can draw on different styles. That's my point.
Right, but I might wind up with some tablas in the crowd somewhere. I'm just letting you know that.
Yeah, well, right. I know. I write tablas. I mean, I'm not having. Zaki is a great guy, but one of these days I'd like to do something with him.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's funny. Go ahead.
Yeah. But he's such an amazing musician. But I'm not using tablas right now. Anything but I've done some soundtrack work for various documentaries, and which I've used tablas. I've had a tabla player come in and sort of thing. So I just really love the sound of the tabla.
And here's the I pick up a Ramblin' Jack Elliott LP. I mean, the guy's as country as you can get, and yet he's got a tabla player on the album with a fiddle. I mean, it was just, to me, the mind expansion. Obviously, the acid played a role. That you guys bring in that real sort of nonconformist attitude to the States, and specifically the West Coast, really enlightened that entire area at that time. But I'm looking here, there are so many studio albums. I have no idea who any of these cats are, and I'm just like, he was all over the scene. Everyone from Kim Fowley to Bang, Alex Earthquake, Leigh Stevens, of course, Papa John, Jade. But the one I want to ask you about, could you tell me the story about your memories of the session with Betty Davis?
Oh God, yeah, it was great. Yeah, well, Gregorico and I and Neil Schon, we had a power trio for a while called Sears, Schon, and Rico. This is way before Journey.
I need tapes of that too.
But so I knew Greg, and when Greg was producing Betty Davis, and who was this amazing, who of course was Miles Davis's wife,
of course,
and was sort of responsible, largely responsible for sort of changing his outlook, helped to change his outlook toward Miles, towards a more, I don't know how you'd put it, to bring in away from conventional, not that he ever played completely conventional jazz, but he always played completely his own thing. But he'd start wearing, African clothing, and just really kind of brought him into the '60s, kind of thing, in that '60s feel, very early '70s, and in his thinking, his music, and of course, those beautiful albums have come out of that. But she was a funk. She played funk.
Total funk, yeah.
As you know, and it's amazing music. And I did some session work with Ike Turner too, and Tina. That was amazing. And Bolic Sound in L.A. I did 2 weeks down there. But so Betty was this really wonderful person, and we became good friends. I haven't seen her in many, many years, and she's a wonderful vocalist and very husky voice, but just the musicians. I mean, Larry Graham was on there. He invented that slap bass. He was the guy, and so Gregorico and played the drums. He brought me in. I played an idea. So I played and Mel Saunders played electric piano, and I played acoustic piano on a track called Anti-Love Song, and some people consider that one of the seminal funk albums of one of the major funk albums ever made.
Well, it's unbelievable because I had it for a long time, and it was before I started my program, and I've interviewed Rico, and now I get to interview you, and I'm like, I got to find, and that's all these records that you were on, Pete, are like really high value, high dollar records. You can't find them anywhere. I mean, Dragonfly, sure, from Starship, but a lot of this other stuff is just way out there. I mean, maybe I'll notice it more, but.
Well, there was a period I was doing more session work in L.A. I played on. Did stuff at A&M Records, Capitol Records. Back in '72, I did quite a bit of session work there, playing with different people. Tim Rose, folk. I remember with Gary Malabar on drums, and no, it wasn't. No, that was Russ Conk, I think. That's right. Gary Malabar was another. He's a great drummer. We did a session with Alistair Haley, and then we used to do a lot of stuff. Alex Harvey, not the English Alex Harvey, but it was a country writer.
Souvenirs, it's called.
Yeah, Souvenirs.
Do you have these albums? You have a big LP?
I actually do. I've got some of them. I have over the years. They've appeared, or I've seen them in some store, and I've picked it up. Sometimes when I finish a record, they used to give me one, and I just stash it away somewhere. But so I have started a sort of a collection, and on my Facebook page, Facebook musician page, I've started chronicling. I go back to 1965, and under the photo album section, I put this. I put like the album cover.
Oh, that's great.
And then I write a little story about the album next to it, right? So I'm slowly building. I have built up a discography, but now I'm doing these. Music videos I make up. I take really rough ones. I take the track and of an album I played on back then, and say like I did all those four of the Rod Stewart albums, right? I did Gasoline Alley, Every Picture Tells a Story, and Never a Dull Moment, and Smile. I played piano and a little bit of bass here and there on that stuff, and on this Rod solo albums and not the Faces had their own record contract, and they would come in and play as a band on one track per Rod Stewart solo album. But the solo albums had a sort of motley, strange crew of people session guys, except for Ron Wood, because Ron would play, of course he was with the Faces, and so was Ian McLagan, but they would come in. Ian would always play the B3, and Ron would play the guitar, but he also played the bass, because most of the bass he'd overdub, because I was playing piano on the live stuff, and Rod and Ronnie played in the Jeff Beck band before that, and Ron played bass in that band, so they kind of Mickey Waller on drums, and so that was a really fantastic period. So I forgot what the question was, but I did do quite a bit of session work.
No, it's okay. No, you said something before. The 70s.
Oh, I also was going to say I was making those music videos, and what I do is that I try to find steals of musicians you sometimes didn't even get credit on those albums, but had a massive influence on separating Rod's, because back in those days Rod wasn't anything like the Do You Think I'm Sexy years,
exactly.
The 80s. It was he was like really hardcore folk rock. Bluesy kind of, he sang like Sam, kind of Sam Cookish sort of. That was one of his major influences, and Bob Dylan, and we had this amazing guitarist Martin Whittington, who became a Syd Barrett type fellow that ended up just dropping out after those albums. Brilliant player. He was in Steamhammer too, another band, English blues band. I did some session work with on piano, and but Martin and I had a band together right before I came over to join Jefferson Starship in '74, and we were doing the last Rod Stewart album, Smiler. But so I put photographs, and there was the mandolin player. It was Ray Jackson, I think his name was. He was from Lindisfarne, and if you listen to Maggie May and you listen to some of those albums off Every Picture Tells a Story, which is one of the best albums I ever worked on. I think I thought good about that one, and the mandolin playing. What I gave it was a tremendous influence, and as was the violin player, fiddle player he brought in, we needed one, so he got him from the Italian restaurant around the corner. The guy was playing jazz in the Italian restaurant on the fiddle, on the violin, so he came in and did the session, and he got paid £15 or something, and then Ray and the mandolin player on the original album, the first album, didn't even get credit. We said Rod didn't mean he was. Everyone didn't have computers back then, so obviously Ray was writing out the credits, obviously, and he didn't know it was going to be a massive hit album, and he wrote something like and the mandolin wrote everybody's name, what they played, and he said, and the mandolin player from Lindisfarne, his name escapes me, right? So, but to a musician, that's really, if you don't get, if you get regular session pay, but it's, you like to get credit, it's the least you can do, really, isn't it? It's sometimes you don't even get paid if it's a really cool session or something, but you do it because you like the music, and you do it for the just. Oh,
absolutely! No, it's legacy. It's a legacy thing. It's a matter.
Unless it's a bad album, then you're glad you don't get your name on there.
Then you're right. No, but the Jackson 5 in the early '70s. You look back, and there's no mention of Wilton Felder or any of the other cats that were the rhythm sections to those bands.
Yeah, and they were such an important part of all that music.
Exactly, and that's leads into my next question: is that the brotherhood that I focused on? You guys are still obviously prolifically playing live and putting together studio albums, but you talk about you said something very prophetic and interesting. You said even into the early '80s things were okay, but the ugly '80s came in, and really. And the more I go through this, as I evaluate the record companies, and I evaluate FM radio and the drum track, and then sort of this obsessive need to label music, and then on top of that, I was talking to Glenn Moore, who's the bass player from Oregon, and he said up through before Reagan took over, you could write a grant for $1,500, a university could, to bring in a band like Mahavishnu or other places like that, so that all of a sudden college kids they're on college campuses. So in your mind, why is it as simple to say that was it all just about Ronald Reagan, or how do you see what happened by the middle 80s? Because I'm with you, man. 82, 83, 84, it's okay. Yeah. But by the middle 80s, something. How can you account for that? You lived through it.
You hit it just perfectly. Exactly what I was going to say. It was the early 80s. And of course, I'm only speaking from personal experience, right? You know, and I remember I was in Jefferson Starship in the 70s. It was a completely free form. I mean, we played songs, of course, but we didn't have definite set list, and we were just we'd play, be long instrumental sections, and it was still. It wasn't the Jefferson Airplane. We never tried to be the Jefferson Airplane. Although we did do Grace did White Rabbit and Somebody to Love, of course. We did that, but those songs. But we weren't trying to be like the Airplane, But it still had that spirit.
Exactly.
Even though it had Miracles, the number one hit Miracles, which was the more that was a great song. We weren't, trying to. It was the next decade. Music had moved on. And the Airplane were fantastic, and that was one thing, and then we were another thing, and then so along come the 80s and the beginning, and so we had the big riot in Germany. When I lost my bass, and it was 2 basses, all my equipment actually, everything was burnt. But that's a whole nother story.
I know.
Anyway, but so Grace went into rehab for one album, and the drummer then got in a terrible car accident, very bad one. He was laid up for years, and so Ainsley joined the band, and then I got Ainsley in the band, and then Paul got a different record producer. We used to use Larry Cox, who was a wonderful record producer. He was Buddy Holly's drummer, and that was through the 70s, and then we gradually, we kind of went into and we got a new singer in the band, a male singer, and then with a really high voice, and then things sort of we started in a more, with Ron Nevison producing, we got into a more, he used to produce Heart and a lot of other bands like that. We got into a more sort of harder rock direction, and Marty left, but the band, other than that, and so Mickey Thomas had kind of replaced Marty, really, I suppose, and Mickey supplied the high voice that Grace had at that point. And then Grace came back again after one album, actually, but she only left for one album. But we were still a hard rock band that did their own. Not hard rock, I was trying to say. So we were still a real band that did our own. Actually, did basic tracks in the studio. When we wrote a song, we like people, the way people had recorded for a long time, all through the 70s and large parts of the 60s. As part of the 60s, you went in and you recorded the basic tracks, which was be like drums, bass, and the rhythm instruments, and with a work vocal or something, and then you, which you sometimes kept if it was really good, and then you overdubbed other instruments, right, on the multi-track machine, mostly for separation, sounds, and different various reasons, but we were still doing that, which was good. The way it was, we'd go for really good basic tracks, had a good feel, and we'd do a bunch of takes, and we usually ended up with using the first take because it was the liveliest, and then the Starship. I don't really want to get into a whole thing about Starship, but we ended up getting its producer in that another different producer that started using this. Synclavier, which is sort of a sequencer type instrument, and he just set up in the control booth, and we wouldn't do basic tracks. He just built up the songs, quantized the time, and I even sampled on the very last album, and I was at odds with the band by now. Paul Canton had left,
Freiberg had left, and I was completely at odds with it. But you're sort of in this thing, and you've been in it since I'd been in it at that point. 10 years. I was in it, the whole band, for 13 years until I left. But you're part of this thing, and it slowly morphed into something which is almost unrecognizable, and you're sort of fighting this tide, and because I was really at that point in the mid '80s, we did that album Knee Deep in the Hoopla built this city on rock and roll on it, and it was like which is considered one of the worst records of all time by some. And so I've had this dubious distinction of having played on one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Rod Stewart's Every Picture Tells a Story, and one of the worst, right? But of course, some people like that song actually, which brings me to the point that there's music for everybody, right? So, well, what is music, and it's what young people in rock and roll is marketed to young people, often, and mostly at that point, and it all depends on at the point in their life when their hormones are raging, and they hear whatever they're told they're supposed to like, they'll like. And I'm not saying I'm not saying they don't have any taste, but a lot of it is what they're exposed to, and that's what that's what the demise of that's when the '80s record companies and record producers started getting deciding what was played on radio, and so there was sometimes difficult for young people to hear enough of a variety of music to decide for themselves what they wanted to hear. Right? They kind of had this stuff rammed down their throats, and a lot of it was, and the recording style became, everything was picked apart meticulously, and you had to play live on stage, everything exactly as you played on the record, instead of drifting away or getting improvisational. It was frowned upon, and you went up there, and you played songs, and that were played on the record, and the crowds liked it because they liked to hear the songs that they got to know and everything. But from the musician's point of view, it became very stale for me, and I think the Jefferson Starship audience of the '70s began to drop away in the mid '80s. He definitely did, and they didn't like that stuff. They didn't want to hear it, and I don't blame them. I didn't like it, and around that time, my wife and I were getting into human rights work in Guatemala because of the Reagan-backed. You mentioned Reagan. He was calling it communism, but as the reason to be sending shipments of arms to El Salvador or Guatemala, and there was civil wars going on down there. Terrible right-wing dictatorships were murdering their own people, and
we were supplying them with weapons.
We were,
yeah. Right.
And in the name of fighting communism, which is stupid. It wasn't. It wasn't the reason we were doing it. And it was. And so. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get all political.
No, I love talking to Pete Sears because we get a preface, and then we get the answer. But the thing is, listen, we have you segued perfectly. I got a piece of music here I want to put in, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay?
Okay, man. Great.
Every time we believe in lies.
We didn't get a chance to hear the lyrics. It says, "They say communism's creeping in. Nobody knows where it will spread, and they will kill."
Well, that the lyric, and actually my wife wrote the lyrics for that song. It's really good. And
really good.
What she's obviously saying is that's the excuse they give. They say communism is creeping in. And they need to. And we were, working very heavily with the Guatemalan refugees from war. They were coming into this into the San Francisco Bay Area here. They had safe houses, and they were escaping war. I mean, it was civil war down there. It was really, really bad, and the army was brutal, and down there, and these are Guatemalan Mayan. These are Mayan Indians. They communists call them communists is absurd, and I mean, although they couldn't they couldn't gather in their village to have a village meeting without it considered subversive and anti-government, and the army would. The army, there was the statistics are horrific in the 80s. Like 440 Mayan Indian villages wiped off the face of the earth by the armies, the Guatemalan army, and it's all documented now, of course, and with Amnesty International, and there were Guatemalan human rights groups working internationally to try to bring this to the light of the people, but there are a few newspapers in America, like San Jose Mercury, did an expose on it, and our role in it. I'm not saying that the U.S. troops were there; they weren't, but we were supporting in different ways these right-wing dictatorships, and that were trying to preserve their the status quo and try to keep the people poor. And but Guatemala, of course, is a wonderful country. Lake Atitlan, I visit there as often as I can. I think it was Lake Como in Italy was Aldous Huxley's favorite lake until he came across Lake Atitlan up in the mountains of Guatemala, which is just spectacular. And but in the 80s, the Civil War was raging, and it was just, it was a terrible thing, an awful thing. But, and so it was very frustrating. I was involved. My mother-in-law, Bonnie, she was living down there, and she barely got out, and she was here, at all the rallies, trying to. She wasn't an activist before that. But she first witnessed a massacre in a field of Mayan Indians by the troops, government troops. These are Indians. They didn't have any weapons on them or anything. She witnessed this personally, firsthand, and so I'm getting this information firsthand, and she got out of there and somehow, and it was a very, very heavy time. I'm not the only person who knew about it, of course. There was I think there was a newspaper in Guatemala City that published a bunch of, managed to somehow publish a list of U.S. performers that were against the war, and I was listed in there and stuff, and
it's just
it became
interesting.
dangerous to travel around, of course, down there. So there was a period when I didn't. I had young children, and there was a period I didn't go down there, but because your name gets on this list, and but basically I was all this was going on, and I was trying to write songs. Jeanette and I were trying to write songs, or at least not all the songs, just write a song. We wrote that song you just played, One More Innocent, was supposed to go on the album that had We Built This City in Rock and Roll, and the guys in the band and the producer and the record company
just didn't. They actually said they didn't want anything on there that's going to bring anybody down, right? Or make people think too much, that kind of thing. I just wanted supposed to rock and roll as escapism, and it is, and it should be. But there should also be in music room to. It comes with a responsibility to influence. I mean, you influence whether you like it or not. I mean, if you've got an audience, you're influencing. It doesn't mean you're brainwashing people. People got to make it. They can make their own minds up whether they like it or not. But they are. But it's being heard, and it is influencing people. And if people like a particular lead singer or something, they're gonna if they're impressionable at an impressionable age, they're going to be influenced by it. So it's an important any art, not just music. And so you have a responsibility. You can't just say it's escapism, and just say it's just good time music and that's what it should be. You just can't. If you do, I mean, there is. But as I say, there is definitely musicians could choose to only do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally honorable, and it's needed in society, and it's some sort of escape valve, But at the same time, they shouldn't put down people that do that, And so I have great respect for Jackson Browne and people like that have, who the lyrics have always, he's always been cared about those same problems, and I just so the 80s, I was at odds with that song. We didn't go. They said they liked the music, but the lyrics were too. The producer said, but the lyrics were too heavy, and
too
so
heavy.
That was that. And so I left the band right after that. I did after that album. I left in 1987, and so I went plunged into the studio and did that album. You just played Watchfire, and I had Barbara Latunji, Mickey Hart brought those guys, got Barbara Latunji along as Mickey helped me out there, and
well, let's not forget about the steel drummer Andy Narell too.
Yeah, Narell, and
O.J. Akamoto.
Gregorico played on some tracks, and Jerry came in, and he's on that track playing. You just heard that was Jerry playing all the lead guitar fills, and so that was Holly Near, the feminist, the activist. One wonderful singer. She was singing the lyrics, because I wasn't really. I sang on that album, but I if you can call it that, but I wasn't really a singer. I'd always been the piano player or the bass player or a guitar player, rhythm guitar player, whatever. And then did a lot all through my career, but until a number of years ago, after the Grateful Dead, after I almost joined the Grateful Dead, but the singing, I just couldn't sing, and Jerry, called me up afterwards, and after Brent died, and he said that he told me, they probably told the other 2 or 3 other musicians that were auditioned the same thing, but I don't know, but he said that I was the second choice for that, for that slot that Vince got, but I could, but it's the singing was the problem, I couldn't say, I didn't have that gruff kind of, or that high, or I wasn't a lead singer, and so I took singing lessons after that. I did, I took singing lessons and decided, hey, I might as well try this out. So I sing now, if you can call it that. It's not really singing; it's sort of like trying to get a song across. But anyway, that was
Brent's voice was also. I mean, it's hard to comp anything close to that.
Well, yeah. They did tell me when Bobby and Jerry came over to my house, we would try. They told me we played some piano. I played some piano, and he said no problem there, and I mean we start, but the singing part of it, like they did tell me they weren't really looking to replace exactly what Brent sounded like, obviously, vocally, but Vince, to me, was the perfect choice, and it's what's so tragic about his. To me, his voice. When I was disappointed that I didn't get that gig, because I was at a particular point. I'd left Starship. I'd done the Watchfire album that you just heard, all about human rights abuses and rainforest stuff, which got lots of really good reviews, but didn't, but there was no real record company or anything. Well, Redwood Records were great, but that was Holly Near's label, but it wasn't like there were no singles on there. All the songs were acoustic or electric. I've got a 30-piece Russian choir. It's a really. I reacted to the way the recording of the 80s was done, and went in and just did it completely. Went back to doing it, for better or worse, in a more anyway. So Jerry ended up putting that record after Redwood Records closed down. He backed. We did a human rights video about Guatemala, which is on YouTube, but and it's called using a song called Guatemala. It's on YouTube under my name in Guatemala, but Jerry helped fund that through the Rex Foundation. He gave his money to that, and it got Dave Grissom's on there, and Kike Cruz, who was from Chile, great, played the flute.
I feel honored to be able to have found this CD here in Tucson. I mean, it's very hard to come by, and it is. And you can feel all the musicians are in the studio. It's not like what you talked about before, where it was sort of piecemealed out. Nowadays you can say, okay, Larry Carlton, do a solo in Nashville and send it to me via email, and we'll put it into the song. It was the idea that, we're all in this together. Let's get a good feel, and you can, and that comes through. I mean, listen, my ear is not used to this album. I've had to go back and listen to it many times. And I still have to, because it's just so I don't know, it's just very fresh. I have a laundry list here of things that I thought we were, Terry Cox, Pentangle, Steamhammer, Ansley Dunbar, and so I guess what I'm saying is, do you think that before you hit the road, we could continue this conversation?
Sure.
All right, and I want to just say I look forward to seeing you in Phoenix in a couple of weeks a lot, and it really was. We'll be in touch, Pete. But it was really an honor to talk to you today.
All right, sorry to ramble.
Ramble on Rose, man. Ramble on Rose.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be in touch. All right. Cheers.
All the best.
You too. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.